This video discusses specificity in cascading style sheets. Specificity relates to how conflicts are solved in cascading style sheets. If you had a style sheet that you were trying to apply or a rule, I shouldn't say a style sheet, but a rule that you were trying to apply and it just wasn't responding, you probably would be dealing with a conflict issue. But how would you know? Is it just that you didn't write the rule correctly, or is there something getting in your way? Well, there's two things to think about when it comes to conflict. There's source order and origin. And origin is, where does the style come from? In other words, which style sheet is the style in? Remember, we've talked about the order of style sheets, and there's a linked style sheet, an embedded style sheet, an inline style sheet, a browser style sheet. Those are all things that you could be contending with. And you have source order, so you have origin and you have source order. A source order is, where does the declaration fall in the order of the style sheet? If the declaration falls after another rule, it might win unless there's another style out there that's more specific. The declaration in the rule that's closest to the content typically wins if there are two, well, it will win if there are two rules with the same specificity ranking. So let me show you. If you had a rule in a style sheet that had was controlled by an that was controlling the H1s, and we do right here, this one is the one that is working is this one here, and it is specifying Verdana, Geneva, sans serif, and font size and color. So if you have that, the rule that comes second, because the other one that's in here does the exact same thing. So the one that is second, technically, it loaded after, because it loads from top to bottom. So the one that loaded last is the one that is going to actually affect this style, or the text that's in H1. So if I drag the first rule down, so now it is the second rule, it affects the H1. Now these two rules control the exact same thing, font, size, color. If the first rule only controls the size, the second rule does not address size. We get the size from the first rule and the color and the font family from the second rule. And so if what that comes down to in specificity is, whatever loads last relating to the H1 in this case is going to win if there's two things that say the same thing. So font family here, the one that loads last is the one that is actually, they happen to be the same thing in this case, is the one that actually wins out. Color up here, color here, the one that loads last, the second one, is the one that wins out. This rule does not address font size. So since the second rule doesn't address font size, the first rule that's the one thing from the first rule that's actually being employed on the page. Now, if you happen to have an H1, this is an external style sheet, and then you have your browser style sheet, and it is also speccing out H1 for font family, size, and color, your external style sheet wins over the browser default style sheet because it has a higher specificity, or it has a higher priority, an order ranking than the browser style sheet, assuming the rules are written in the exact same specificity. So you have your source order. So your browser style sheet is lower in priority than your external style sheet. The external style sheet, if it has the same exact rule in it as the browser style sheet, with the same exact specificity, will win out. Now we have a paragraph on this page, and this paragraph has no styles applied to it except what might be happening with the browser style sheet, but we haven't done anything yet. So this is when we're going to talk about specificity, and specificity, you know, there's a little bit of math involved in this. So let me just show you on here that there's basically 4 places in the specificity ranking system. So there is a 0. So if there's no style for something, nothing at all, you have 4 places. And the first place was kind of, if you want to think about it like our numbering system, it's kind of like, in order to help you remember what ranks over what or how to think about it, it's sort of like our system in that you might want to think of this as a ones and the tens and the hundreds and the thousands. So when you have an element, so a P, if you have an element just for the paragraph tag, that is an element. And elements end up in this place. They end up here. So for each element, it adds to this place. Okay, so if I create a rule here, and we'll just do the color. Oh, that'll be a really hard one to see on screen. We'll do that. That's still, I need you guys to be able to see this a little bit easier. Let me change that out. So that is literally in the specificity ranking system, that's what it would be. 1, or sorry, 0, if you read it left to right, 0, 0, 0, 1. Now, if you have 2 elements in your rule, body space P, so now it's saying the paragraph that is inside the body, and we'll give this the color of this purple here, it now wins out. It wins out even if I move this above the P, because its rule looks like this in the ranking system. So even though it's coming first, it totally wins out over this because it's more specific. The one with higher specificity will always win. So this goes on from right where we're at to dealing with classes and dealing with IDs and dealing with inline styles. And to help you remember the math on this, the ranking on this, we can go to this really nice JPEG that's out there, and you can find it by looking up Specificity Wars. So if I do a search for Specificity Wars, and this is what comes up, stuffandnonsense.co.uk, archives, CSS Specificity Wars. If we go there and you scroll down, you can read through this. If you scroll down, you eventually get to this JPEG. That's how I got there. And it is showing you what I just showed you. One element is, well, now it's only showing you 3 ranking places. The 4th ranking in here that it doesn't talk about is the actual, like, when you, if you were just to wrap this with a style, it's going to win out. So that's the most specific one. But the 3 that it's dealing with are, you have an element selector, which we just did. We did P instead of A. Then we have 2 element selectors. We did body and P right here, body, P. And so he's showing you 002. I've got 4 places, but 002. Now, if you have a class selector, it is a 1 and then comma 0 on it. So what happens there if we do a class? So we're trying to target this rule. So we will invent a class here. Pink paragraph. Okay. And all we're going to do is give this pink text. And now we have to, we'll put it down here at the first, we have to apply the class to the paragraph. So I'm going to select the paragraph, set class, and apply. Well, it wins out. Now what happens if we go up one? It still wins out. If we go up another, it still wins out. Because in the ranking system, something in the tens place, if you will win out over two things in the ones place. So in this, we have one class that is greater than, so that would kind of be like 10 is greater than 2 in a sense. So this wins out, this class selector. I highly recommend printing out this or writing down the information on here to help you out because well, I think it shows up in one of our quizzes, but on top of that, when you get stuck, this will help you understand things. So now we're going to take a class selector and an element selector, so one thing in the tens place, if you will, and one thing in the ones place. And I say that that's really not what's going on. It doesn't equal like 11 for real, but it seems to work out that if I use that comparison, it makes sense to people, and it does seem to, like, I haven't found a flaw in that comparison yet where it throws people off. So if we now do, like it's got here, a class and an element, so I'm going to create another rule that under compound, that is P with a class of pink paragraph. So this is two things now. Let's see if this one wins out, and we'll see if I'm understanding what he's got on here. Now we're making it green. Does it win out? Not necessarily like that. It doesn't win out. Hold on a minute. So we have P with the class. Now, of pink paragraph. So that one, he says that it'll rank higher than that one, but it's not. And it's not, I'm confused why it's not. Well, that's because I have a misspelling, I think. Let's have a look here. There we go. Okay. I was curious why that wasn't working and when it says it should, and it makes sense that it should. So it does. Now if we move it, it just helps if one can spell. If we move this one with just a class below the one without or with a class and an element, it still doesn't win out. So this is saying when you have a rule that is P or an element dot and then the class with no spacing, it's saying a paragraph with a class of whatever that it might be. In this case, we're calling it pink paragraph, or, well, we're not spelling it properly, but you get the point. So if we go further, we can do two element selectors, and that will win out over this one. So two element selectors, and since I have this misspelled, I'm going to just copy this. I think I'm just missing that final P there, but two element selectors and a class. Okay, so let's do that. We have body is an element, P is an element, dot, and then our name of our class here. I'm going to say OK, and this time we will give it a very readable yellow text, and it wins out. It still wins out when I move it up in the order. It wins out. The whole time it wins out. And that's because we have two elements, so we have two things in the ones place, if you will, and one thing in the class place, which the tens place. So that's what he's showing here. Now, two classes, you have two right here, and then two classes plus two elements. So what happens when you get to an ID? Remember, we've put IDs on things. So I have a class on this, and I have an ID equals, it would help if I could do that. There we go. ID equals gray paragraph. And I'm even going to spell paragraph correctly this time. So we're going to take that, and we're going to create a new rule, and let's just see what happens. This is just an ID. So this is now what we would consider the hundreds place, and we're going to make it gray and say OK, and it wins out. Let's put it there. So it is way up in the order. The very last thing to load is this simple P rule. It's not going to win. This isn't going to win right here. Two places, two things in the ones place. A thing in the tens place and a thing in the ones place, that's not going to win out, because now we have this one thing it is basically in the hundreds place, and it wins out over all of them, that ID, because that's one thing in the hundreds place, so to speak. Okay, so again, specificity, it'll get you. Eventually, you'll be making stuff up and nothing will be changing, and you'll be wondering why. This is when you turn to this chart and go, oh, okay, IDs rank higher than classes, classes rank higher than elements, and then when I start combining them, here's what happens. Okay, so be sure to have this chart. You probably will need it in a quiz coming up, and you're definitely going to need it when you're coding your sites and your styling stuff and nothing seems to be working. This is when you can look at your style sheet and try to figure out what the heck's going on. Another thing you can do to try to find out, oh, do I have other stuff that is just not working, is you can use Firebug here, and I can go to this class, or to this paragraph, and I can look in Firebug, and here's the interesting thing. Firebug will show me, so I've got this paragraph selected. It shows me this is the rule that is affecting the paragraph. This rule could affect the paragraph, but look, it's being crossed out. And this could affect the paragraph, but so it's showing you, here's all these other rules that are targeting this paragraph. They don't win when it comes to font color. They don't win. This is the only one that wins out when it comes to font color. Okay? So if you're wondering, you're like, oh, how many rules? Oh, I've written 7 rules, and they all kind of target the same thing, and this is the one that's winning out. Oh, okay. So Firebug's helpful that way. Oops, so sorry about that. And the other thing is Dreamweaver's Code Navigator. If I right-click, I get Code Navigator. You can see it's got all these rules in here that are, are targeted towards that paragraph. This one, it's like the opposite of what we just saw in Firebug, where this is the one that's winning out. These guys are not doing anything because this very last one is the one that is actually affecting it. So I like Firebug for looking at that sort of thing because it's a little clearer because it's just flat out crossing things out. But you can look at it through the Code Navigator and Dreamweaver as well.